Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. I am a little late because I am sad for the almost 20 families that are grieving the loss of their loved ones in Maine today, because I know that sometimes unless something happens to you, you don't really understand what it feels like. And um o- they're still on lockdown. They still haven't found the mass shooter, and the world is still just going on just like it always has. And I remember when I was first driving my own car, you could get leaded gas or you could get unleaded gas, and I was didn't really understand the implications of either one and didn't really care. I was completely ignorant about lead and gasoline. And it was only when I became an adult that I realized as a child that I actually had lead poisoning, and understand that it's important to make sure that we don't have products that have lead in them. Also, you look back to when we had this huge hole in the ozone layer, and it was because of CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons in aerosol cans, and people were like, "How are we gonna get rid of these things? Because, CFCs are everywhere, and it's gonna cost companies way too much money." Um, I remember, like, traveling across country, uh, laying in the dash of the car, not wearing a seatbelt as we would go to visit my grandmother in Mississippi. There are many things, cars didn't all even have, seatbelts at one point, and so it's like, how do you fix this problem? And what I think is interesting about mass shootings in particular is that this is a fairly new problem we have developed, and yet we have already developed a certain level of what I call, indifference to the problem. Somebody asked me this week, they said, "Nicole," if you don't know, I get an opportunity to talk about empathy all the time. They said, "Nicole, what do you think is the opposite of empathy?" And they said, "I think it's apathy." And I said, "Well, apathy and indifference mean the same thing." In 2018, we had 300 or so mass shootings, and I could argue that that's far too many. Um, but we have to, at some point, look at why, if businesses, if taxpayers, if society is losing money every single day based on mass shootings, why is it that we can't figure this problem out? I'm looking at some numbers right here that says every day, every single day, almost $8 million is spent on healthcare costs related to transportation, ambulance, and gun violence, and long-term medical care related to gun violence. And an estimated $147 million per day related to work missed due to injury or death. American taxpayers pay $30.2 million every day in police and criminal justice costs for investigation, prosecution, and incarceration. Employers, so these are the businesses, these are the people that say, if it don't make money, it don't make sense, lose an average of almost $1.5 million a day on productivity revenue. You see, because I'm a business owner, I think my ability to be empathetic to business owners has gone up, since 2016 when I started this business. And feel free to push back on me at any point. But I'm thinking about this bowling alley owner who, how long you think it's going to take for that place to recoup the revenue lost from people getting massacred in there? Last Saturday I went to B'nai Yehuda to learn more about Jewish tradition. It was already on the schedule, had been on the schedule for a while. And there was a bat mitzvah happening at the same time. And there was a little girl there, and she was so happy. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen a little girl so happy. Interestingly enough, the way my biases were working, I wasn't expecting to see anybody Black besides myself. But the little girl was, I'm going to say clearly, she looked like she was biracial to me, Black and white. And just the joy emanating from her face in this environment where one, she was the only one, and two, just I don't know. I wanna say oblivious, but it was that's not it. It was like pure, pure joy. But while I'm sitting there watching her bat mitzvah, I was thinking about that when I pulled up in the parking lot, I was like, "Oh my gosh, there are people who just because this is a Jewish worship center who would, like, come here and try to kill everybody." And when I got to the door was locked. You had to push a button to get in, and there was a person who asked me what I was there and who I was there for and who I was there to see. Um, and interestingly enough, I think I'm trying to remember what I had on, but it was, there was no way I would have been able to hide a weapon anywhere on me or anything like that. Very high security. And then later, I see armed security guard sitting in a chair outside that same door. And I'm like, my gosh, even though Black churches have consistently been the targets of racial terror and harm throughout history, I've never really sat inside of a church and been concerned for my safety. Now, I would argue that that could be because my mama was in the back with her gun in her purse. Judge somebody else. My mama ain't even here to defend herself no more. I'm just telling you that that's what it was. But my question is, do more guns make us safer? People tend to think so. And when you watch our politicians talk about why people need to have things like AR-15s, they'll say things like, "Oh, for shooting a raccoon." I don't know if you've ever been to a gun range with an AR-15, but you don't need that kind of weapon to shoot a raccoon, I can guarantee you that. They'll say things like shooting feral pigs or, shooting the fox to keep them out of the chicken coop. And I'm just telling you, you just don't need that kind of weapon in order to be able to do that. And one of my cousins is a trauma surgeon, and she absolutely understands the social determinants of violence and has gotten to the point where she is like, look, I don't think we're gonna ever be able to solve this problem. We've got too many guns out in our system right now. And I just uphold for us that we can never get to the point of learned helplessness. Have we tried really hard in the past? Yes. Have we been successful? Not really. Because while just a few years ago in 2018, we were at 336 mass shootings. In 2020, y'all, while we were all on lockdown, we still somehow managed 610 mass shootings. And in 2023, we are already on track to surpass that number. And I just remember when we used to be sad, when we used to speak up. And I bet you the people in the state of Maine thought for sure that this is the kind of thing that would never happen here. How do I know that? Because Maine has the fourth lowest homicide rate in the nation. The entire state had less people killed in the entire year than I think Kansas City has in a week. And so when you consider that, then you have people who have this presumed amount of safety. I bet you I haven't been watching the news, but a lot I've been reading it. But I bet you somebody has been on television. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, saying something like, "I just didn't think this thing would happen here." And my question would be, what does it take for us? What does it take for us to not have to experience a thing to understand what it must feel like? I don't have to have my house bombed to know that it is incredibly inconvenient and it is traumatizing and it is awful to be bombed every single day, multiple times a day. I have lived in an environment where my house that I lived in had bullet holes on the outside of it, where I was laying on the floor because you just didn't know who was going to come through to retaliate. We understand the social determinants of violence and we know how to reduce it. And more guns is not on the list. It really isn't. And when you have more than half of your country saying, we need a 60-day or 30, at least a 30-day waiting period, these are people who understand when somebody is upset, when somebody upset, they are likely to do something that they wouldn't normally do because they're upset. So a little cooling off. I mean, think about it. Have you ever said something in anger that you didn't intend and then you had to go back and fix it? Well, there are some people who do things in anger that they never intended because they were triggered. And it is helpful if they don't have access to a weapon. And what I hate about this is that people have turned this into a mental health condition or mental health challenge when most people who have mental health conditions, of course, are not out here killing people. But if by chance, I told you, I hear voices in my head that tell me to go shoot somebody, the last thing I should have access to is assault rifles. And what I think is fascinating is that we've got red flag laws that most Americans support. We've got background checks that most Americans support. 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 support red flag laws. 8 out of 10 support that you should have some mental health background check. 8 out of 10 suggest that there should be some limit to the type of gun that you can have without any kind of training. What's fascinating about this dude in Maine is that he was training other people how to shoot weapons. The rest of the world is looking at us and going, "Oh, y'all think y'all exceptional. Exceptional in that you're killing your own citizens." And I think we have become too used to it, too used to it. And the only way to combat indifference is to think about what would you want to happen if it were you? You see, these people who lived in Lewiston, Maine are now a place where they never even locked their doors. See, now talking about, oh, we need to get ring cameras. So let's talk about it. I looked this up real quick. What organizations or what industries seem to benefit from a revenue standpoint when mass shootings go up? Firearms and ammunition's pretty obvious. Home and personal security systems, pretty obvious. Private security funds, firms, maybe not so obvious. People who want to make sure that they have security at their events, their churches, their businesses, their temples after one of these events. Interestingly enough, mental health and counseling services see a higher demand. The media and news outlets have continuous media coverage, resulting in increased viewership and advertising dollars. Safety and training programs. So businesses are now teaching us what to do. In fact, one of the things that Dr. Barry and I and Dr. Monker and the Human Rights Commission that's focused on the Metro Area Task Force, what we're trying to do is to figure out how we can get into chambers to teach people how to stop the bleed. Because here in Kansas City, while our shootings are down, our homicides are up. What does that mean? That means people are bleeding to death. They don't have to die. It's the types of guns that we have out on the street that are causing people to bleed to death before the ambulance can get there. So we need to be teaching people how to pack wounds, metal detectors and security equipment, lobbying and advocacy groups, both pro gun and gun control advocacy groups benefit. Our politicians are not doing what we want. And when folks keep talking about what is happening halfway around the globe, I'm not telling you to be numb about what's happening halfway around the globe. We are interconnected, all of us, everyone here on earth. And I will also say to you, when you are a single issue voter, when you're like, I ain't gonna take my guns away, or "Oh, I'm never gonna vote for so and so because they made this international law decision, you are the reason why abortion has the Roe versus Wade has been overturned. And one of my friends in Virginia damn near died because she needed a DNC when she lost her baby. And they wouldn't do it because they couldn't anymore. The reason why DEI professionals have been fired throughout this country because you can't say the words diversity, equity, or inclusion anymore. Why? Because of the people we've decided to put in office. My friends and colleagues who are in the LGBTQ community who have adopted children now worried about are they going to be able to keep their kids because of our single issue voters. You can't be a single issue voter, honey. And I don't care if the issue for you is just really like a non-negotiable. When you in this day and age, I don't like to be the one to say that you got to pick the best of the worst. But there ain't going to be no perfect. And if nothing teaches us that more than gun violence, I don't know what will. Because US citizens are pretty clear on what we need. And our legislators are not doing what they're supposed to do. And so I'll just say to you, we can do hard things. Everything constructed can be deconstructed. If we can remove lead from gasoline, if we can figure out to take CFC carbons out of uh, aerosol cans, if we can figure out how to make seat belts mandatory whereby people don't even think about them, they automatically put them on, We can do hard things and we can do this. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.